Imagine this. A country that has long been a cornerstone of the European Union suddenly starts drifting eastward, towards Russia, towards China, and potentially into the orbit of BRICS. Hungary, once the EU's proverbial black sheep, is now on the verge of a major geopolitical transformation. The stakes are high, and the question that looms large is why? Why is Hungary willing to risk alienating the EU in favor of forging stronger ties with Russia and China? What is driving this unprecedented pivot? And what could the long-term consequences be for Europe, NATO, and the global order? Let's step back and set the stage. Hungary has been a proud member of the European Union since 2004, but over the last few years, under the leadership of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, Hungary has increasingly adopted policies that challenge the EU's foundational principles. The EU, as a political and economic union, has long sought to ensure that all member states adhere to shared democratic values, rule of law, and basic freedoms. However, Hungary's political shift under Orbán's leadership has created tensions that now threaten not just its relationship with the EU, but also the overall unity of the Union itself. The core issue at hand? National sovereignty. Under Orbán, Hungary has increasingly felt that the EU has overstepped its mandate, interfering in internal matters such as judicial independence, media freedoms, and the protection of traditional values. Many Hungarians, especially those who support Orbán's government, view their nation as a bulwark of conservative Christian values, a stance they see as being in direct opposition to the EU's more progressive agenda. This has created a rift, with a significant portion of the Hungarian population becoming increasingly disillusioned with Brussels' influence. A recent survey revealed that support for the EU has plummeted to around 47%, a dramatic drop from 80% just a decade ago. Now the critical question, is the EU still Hungary's best ally? For Orbán, the answer seems to be a resounding no. Facing growing pressure from the EU on several fronts, Hungary has begun exploring alternative alliances that could help it assert greater control over its national destiny. This pivot toward Eastern powers, Russia and China in particular, is not just a change in political rhetoric. It represents a fundamental shift in Hungary's foreign policy and its role within the EU. Hungary's newfound focus on strengthening ties with Russia and China has manifested in various forms. The country has signed trade agreements with both powers, seeking to capitalize on the growing markets of the East. One of the most significant moves has been Hungary's decision to join China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, making it the first EU member state to do so. The BRI is a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure project launched by China, aimed at building a vast network of transportation, trade, and energy links across Asia, Europe, and beyond. Hungary's participation in the BRI offers the promise of significant economic benefits, but it also binds the country more closely to Chinese interests, a relationship that some critics fear could undermine Hungary's autonomy. This strategic realignment raises alarm bells in the EU, which has long prided itself on a unified foreign policy. Hungary's actions, particularly its involvement in the BRI, present a challenge to that unity. The European Union has traditionally been an advocate for collective action in international relations, but Hungary's increasingly independent stance could lead to fractures within the bloc. It's not just about trade deals. It's about the ideological lines being drawn in Europe as Hungary deepens its ties with the East. The broader question now is whether Hungary's actions signal the beginning of a shift in the EU's core values, with some members seeking to align more with Russia and China, while others remain firmly committed to the Western liberal order. Let's take a closer look at Hungary's growing relationship with BRICS, an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, a bloc that has emerged as a counterweight to Western-dominated institutions. BRICS has gained increasing importance on the global stage, with its member states asserting themselves as significant players in the international economic and political spheres. For Hungary, the appeal of BRICS is clear. The bloc represents a growing economic force, with potential for mutual benefit, especially in areas like energy, infrastructure, and investment. BRICS nations have become increasingly influential in global trade, and the numbers are hard to ignore. In 2022, BRICS countries accounted for 31% of global GDP, surpassing the G7, which held just 30%. This shift in economic power is a clear signal that the center of global economic gravity is moving eastward, and Hungary seems eager to position itself at the forefront of this emerging narrative. By aligning itself more closely with BRICS, Hungary hopes to tap into the growing economic influence of these nations and secure a more prominent role on the world stage. However, Hungary's pivot toward Russia and China is not without its complications, especially in the area of energy. Despite EU sanctions on Russia following its invasion of Ukraine, Hungary has continued to import Russian natural gas. This has put the country at odds with its EU counterparts, who have sought to isolate Russia economically. Hungary's government argues that energy security is a national priority and that the country cannot afford to abandon its Russian energy supplies. With about 85% of Hungary's gas imports still coming from Russia, this dependence creates significant risks for Hungary's relationship with the EU, as well as its standing in international forums. The issue of energy security is a dilemma faced by many European nations, caught between the need for stable energy supplies and the pressure to reduce dependence on Russia. For Hungary, the stakes are especially high, as its energy strategy has become a point of contention both within the EU and in the broader geopolitical landscape. This situation underscores the delicate balancing act Hungary faces as it seeks to navigate its energy needs while also distancing itself from EU sanctions and Russian influence. Hungary's foreign policy shift also extends to its position on military aid to Ukraine. In the midst of the ongoing war, Hungary's government vetoed EU military aid to Ukraine, arguing that further military support could escalate tensions and negatively impact Hungary's national security. This controversial stance has put Hungary at odds not only with the EU but also with NATO, of which it is a member. The Hungarian government's refusal to support Ukraine's military efforts has raised questions about its commitment to NATO's collective security goals. This has created a delicate situation for Hungary, as it tries to maintain its autonomy while still remaining within the NATO framework. Furthermore, Hungary has delayed Sweden's NATO membership, citing national security concerns. Many observers speculate that Russia's influence is playing a role in Hungary's hesitation, as Sweden has been one of the EU's staunch critics of Hungary's democratic backsliding. Hungary's veto of Sweden's NATO bid is seen by some as a strategic move to assert its independence from EU pressures, sending a clear message that it will not be easily coerced into compliance with EU demands. Now let's turn to Hungary's growing alliance with China. As the only EU country that openly supports China's Belt and Road Initiative, Hungary is positioning itself as a key intermediary between Europe and Asia. This partnership has led to significant investments in infrastructure, technology, and education, opening new opportunities for Hungary. However, the relationship with China also comes with risks. Critics argue that Hungary's growing dependence on Chinese investments could undermine its sovereignty, as China could use its economic influence to exert pressure on Hungary's political decisions. While Hungary's participation in the Belt and Road Initiative promises short-term economic growth and infrastructure development, it also creates long-term dependencies that could shape Hungary's future trajectory. In 2022 alone, Chinese investments in Hungary exceeded $1 billion, primarily in transportation and energy sectors. While these investments may provide an economic boost, the long-term implications of Hungary's growing dependence on China are unclear. The question remains, what happens when Hungary's obligations to China come due? Will Hungary's growing ties with Russia and China signal the beginning of a larger shift in global power dynamics? In conclusion, Hungary's strategic pivot towards Russia, China, and BRICS marks a significant turning point in its foreign policy and could have far-reaching consequences for the European Union, NATO, and the global order. As Hungary strengthens its ties with the East, it risks fracturing the unity of the EU and upsetting long-established geopolitical alliances. Hungary's actions will continue to reverberate across Europe, and the world will be watching closely to see how this unfolding shift impacts the broader global power dynamics. As Hungary moves closer to BRICS and strengthens its relationships with China and Russia, it is clear that this is more than just a diplomatic shift. It's a challenge to the long-standing global order. The growing presence of BRICS on the world stage, with its expanding membership and push for alternative financial systems, could very well reshape the structure of international relations in the coming years. The move towards BRICS by Hungary is emblematic of a broader trend that is gaining momentum around the globe. Nations are rethinking traditional alliances and seeking more diverse partnerships, particularly in the face of what they perceive as Western dominance or neglect. Hungary's decision to align itself with BRICS, countries that are not only economic heavyweights but also political powers in their own right, signals a shift in the geopolitical landscape. Hungary's pivot could encourage other countries, especially those in the EU, to reassess their relationships with the West. The dissatisfaction brewing in nations like Poland and Italy, who share some of Hungary's sentiments about the EU, points to the possibility of a political shift that could ripple through the Union. The growing Euroscepticism and rising support for national sovereignty among EU citizens could set the stage for a new era of political realignments in Europe. The EU, historically an organization based on economic interdependence and collective decision-making, could face a fundamental test of unity as member states like Hungary pursue their own geopolitical strategies. The traditional EU framework, which has been driven by cooperation and shared economic interests, could be under serious pressure. The Hungarian government's commitment to its newfound alliances, regardless of the EU's stance, highlights the struggle between national interests and collective European action. This new geopolitical direction may inspire other countries in the EU to follow Hungary's lead, and the Union's internal cohesion could be further tested. Countries within the EU that once viewed Hungary's government as an outlier could soon find themselves aligning with similar positions. This shift could spark a reimagining of Europe's global role and its relationships with the rest of the world. Moreover, Hungary's involvement in China's Belt and Road Initiative and its growing economic ties with Russia further complicate matters. Hungary could potentially become a vital link in the development of trade routes that connect Asia and Europe. While this offers Hungary tremendous economic potential, it also places the country in a delicate position. By aligning itself with China and Russia, Hungary risks provoking tensions with its traditional EU allies in the West. As China's influence in the region continues to expand, the long-term effects of Hungary's position on the European Union and its future economic stability remain uncertain. The implications for Hungary's economy are both promising and risky. Increased trade with China and Russia could lead to immediate benefits, including infrastructure projects and job creation in sectors like technology and manufacturing. Yet, over-reliance on these new partners could leave Hungary vulnerable in the future if global markets or political alliances shift again. The risk of economic isolation from the EU is also very real, especially if Hungary's new direction continues to clash with the EU's broader policies. Hungary's leadership, particularly Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, has made it clear that it will not bow to external pressure, especially in matters of energy policy and military defense. Orbán's unwavering stance on sovereignty means that Hungary is prepared to stand firm in the face of potential EU sanctions or trade restrictions. However, this could further isolate Hungary from the rest of Europe, leaving it to navigate a geopolitical maze that is rapidly becoming more complex. The path Hungary chooses will have a lasting impact, not only on its own future, but on the future of the EU and the broader global order. The choices Hungary makes in the coming years will determine its position in a world that is increasingly divided along geopolitical lines. As the global balance of power shifts, countries like Hungary are positioned to play a pivotal role in shaping the future of international relations. In this volatile environment, Hungary's actions will undoubtedly have far-reaching consequences. The country's decision to align with BRICS and its growing partnership with China and Russia may challenge existing global norms and spark debates about the future of international alliances. As Hungary forges its new path, the EU, along with the rest of the world, will need to reassess its strategies for navigating a more fragmented and unpredictable global stage. So, what does the future hold for Hungary and the EU? Will Hungary's decision lead to a broader reconfiguration of the global order, or will it result in a more isolated and vulnerable position for the country? Only time will tell. What is certain, however, is that Hungary's move toward BRICS is not just a change in foreign policy. It is a reflection of the evolving dynamics of power in the 21st century. If you're intrigued by these developments and want to stay updated on global trends, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join our growing community of insightful thinkers. You can also explore another video from our channel, now on the screen.